In Australia, dairy cows and calves together in a paddock is a rare sight. Calves are usually removed from their mothers from as young as a day old. They're no longer needed once their birth triggers milk production. They're called bobby calves.
We generally think about bobby calves as being non-replacement calves, and what we mean by that is calves that are born on a dairy farm that are in excess of requirements, so they're not going to become milking cows in the future. And they're usually male, but there are some female calves as well, and they're under 30 days old. They're not with their mother, and they are usually destined for early slaughter.
And the number each year runs to almost 500,000.
They would be processed at an abattoir in early age, between 5 and 30 days of age would be the definition of a bobby calf. Or some don't even have that option and are euthanized humanely on farm in the first day of life.
Permissible on-farm euthanasia methods include pneumatic bolts, shooting and being hit with a blunt instrument. Victorian dairy farmer Rasheen Powles says everyone wants a better way.
The whole idea of this little calf, a week old, going through the yard process, going on that big long truck ride, going through the abattoir, yeah, it's just not pretty from any angle. Nobody likes it. I think they just see it as the only solution.
But solutions are on the way, so stick with me. The dairy industry knows it's a reputational time bomb. A sleeper for decades, shocking images on social media have prompted action. Dairy Australia veterinarian Andy Hancock says doing nothing isn't an option.
It is something that could turn around and bite us. We saw something happen in Tasmania with an abattoir that got shut down there after some footage was released at the end of last year. And so these things can happen. We need to show to the community and to regulators that we're doing something, that we're moving the needle on this.
Last year, secretly filmed vision at a Tasmanian abattoir showed calves and sheep being handled roughly and stunned incorrectly. Some appeared conscious at the time of death. The state's only abattoir licensed to slaughter calves for export, TQM had its bobby calf licence suspended, forcing farmers to kill calves on farm. 2 years ago, the industry's national policy and advocacy body, Australian Dairy Farmers, released its Surplus Calves Policy Task Force's recommendations. It called for an end to routine on-farm euthanasia of viable calves and set a target of all bobbies being in a valued market chain by 2035. That means getting them accepted into the beef market. Dr Sarah Bolton, a former welfare vet for Dairy Australia, says solutions need to be quicker than that.
This issue is particularly urgent because it's not the last one we'll be dealing with. We know that we already have pressing issues on the horizon that are coming at us after this particular one.
The RSPCA's Dr Natalie Roadnight specialises in animal welfare, ethics and law. Consumer research tells her the deadline is not ambitious enough.
Once they find out what happens to calves on dairy farms, usually the reaction is negative, and that tells you that the current practices on dairy farms are out of step with community expectation.
There are rules about handling bobbies, but she says compliance is a problem. Would the RSPCA like to see blunt force trauma banned?
Absolutely, yeah. We'd like to see blunt force trauma banned for calves, yes.
Being a low-value protein has invited cruel treatment. So much so, in 2016, a Dairy Australia guide advised that calves not be thrown, hit, dropped or dragged, or moved using electric prodders.
Long term, we would like to see these calves not being treated as waste products of the industry. We would like to see those calves having value.
Dairy farmers won't like hearing it, but early cow-calf separation is also emerging as a reputational issue.
So I keep all the calves with the mums. And cows produce plenty of milk, so there's plenty to go around.
Boutique producer Kathy Palmer started doing dairy differently 5 years ago.
You girls are welcome to try the milk if you want.
At the Wood End Farmers Market north of Melbourne, she sells kind milk and cheese.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The kindness element of it makes the milk taste better.
Some customers knew about the fate of bobbies, some didn't.
Do you know what bobby calves are?
I do, and I do, but it's kind of a bit of a shock to actually really think about it.
So do you know what bobby calves are?
No idea. I'm assuming they're the little ones?
Yes. So would that matter to you? Bobby calves being euthanized
100%.
6 days old, 7 days old?
100%. It'd be terrible. It's not a nice thing for anyone to put any animal down.
They go from everything from a couple of days old to there's 4 weeks old up there.
Kathy's milk is from a bobby-free cow-calf contact herd. Calves feed from their mothers until weaning at 6 months, which means less milk for production.
You don't mind wearing that loss? No. I couldn't consume milk knowing what the real price of it was. So, you know, when you see that and you see the calf feeding off the mum, you just know that that's worth it, every cent of it.
Some farmers would say that's crazy. You're just losing money by making those decisions.
Yeah, some farmers would, but this is a really viable option. But we just consider the cows are animals. They're not a machine.
Kathy started her How Now dairy because she loved cheese but hated calf separation and bobby slaughter.
So I couldn't be part of that. I didn't understand how, if anyone saw that, how they could continue to consume dairy without thinking about another way.
A vegetarian working in the music industry, she sold her house in Melbourne to take a punt on a market for kind dairy. It turns out there is one. It took a while. 2 litres is $10, but now she's profitable. Half the milk is bottled and half goes to a cheesemaker.
It feels like this has been a secret that's gone on for so long that most people don't know. I make people cry at farmers markets too regularly when they kind of have that same assumption that I had. That milk comes from a cow that happily gives it and everyone's happy. It's just that there's a big secret that no one's talking about, and I'd love to keep talking about it.
Half this herd of 90 are Kathy's. The rest are Rasheen and Ron Powell's, owners of the farm and dairy near Chatura in northern Victoria. Rasheen's dairied traditionally but prefers this.
When the kids start growing up and they start asking questions about where the calves go, you know, and you have to tiptoe around those questions because you hate where those calves go, I don't have to do that anymore. Being able to make that work and still, you know, make a comfortable living is the tricky bit. So.
Good girls, off we go.
It's working just as Rasheen's paid nearly double for her milk. While the Powells and Kathy Palmer are in the minority, change is on the way. There's wide acceptance in the dairy industry that the quickest way to reduce the number of bobby calves and improve their welfare is to give them more value beyond hides and pet food by letting them become older, more valuable beef animals. But that won't happen unless beef buyers change their bias against dairy beef. Dairy Australia's Andy Hancock runs his own small herd, a cross between dairy and beef cattle. It's a solution being promoted in the Growing Beef from Dairy joint project between Dairy Australia and Meat and Livestock Australia. It's helping 10 dairy farmers find the best way to rear bobbies for different beef markets. As well, the dairy industry's new bobby calf roadmap is due for release next year.
And the aim of the roadmap is to help the industry to achieve its objective of moving away from early life slaughter and routine euthanasia by 2035 by developing valued market chains for dairy beef. We're currently having discussions with partners across the supply chain as to what are the next steps, how do we actually achieve this goal together as a shared responsibility across beef and dairy.
Andy Hancock says the US gives hope it is achievable.
This year they're estimating there will be about 3 million dairy beef calves that go into production, and that's out of a 9 million cow dairy herd, so I guess similar proportions to what we'd hope to achieve. And actually dairy beef calves are selling for somewhere between $700 and $1,000 US at 1 week of age, which is incredible.
A handful of what's been called beef on dairy operations are showing it's not just possible here, it's profitable. Merv and Benita Kosh milk 700 head at Tongala in northern Victoria. They don't have a bobby problem because 16 years ago Peter Wilkinson offered to buy them.
So Merv, how many calves have you had this year?
Yeah, we've had just over 250 come through our spring program.
Yep.
Peter runs Jerry Harvey, yes, that Jerry Harvey's business, Dairy Beef Alliance. An early player in the Wagyu industry, Jerry wanted to increase his herd but didn't have enough Wagyu females. He saw dairy's bobby problem as an opportunity. If dairy farmers only needed 20% of calves to be females, Jerry figured 80% of Holstein milkers could be in calf to his Wagyu bulls. Peter Wilkinson says the half Holstein, half Wagyu calves are high, not low value.
We offer semen in our Wagyu bulls with a contract to purchase those calves back at 7 to 10 days of age, and it gives security around what they can do for their calves. It also helps that bobby calf situation of trying to get calves out of the dairy system.
And that's just...
For Merv, the deal's been a win-win.
They weren't picky of whether it was a bull or a heifer, they were valued the same, and so that made a big difference to our cash flow at that point too.
Yeah, they're a really lovely group of heifers, aren't they?
Yeah.
Peter says initially farmers thought it sounded too good to be true. Now he has 250 farmers supplying 10,000 calves a year, and his books are closed.
Most producers that we work with generally want to do the best thing and the right thing. They understand that social licence requires that they deal with their calves well, and that's the sort of people we want to work with.
The Koshes bottle feed the calves for 7 days, then Tracy Todd collects them to rear for Dairy Beef Alliance.
They're really friendly and they love you to bits. It's just a rewarding job.
Tracy can house 500 at a time.
We get the calves at 7 days old, rear them until 12 weeks, and then they go into backgrounding after that.
They grow up on the backgrounding properties. Tracy wants more bobbies given longer, high welfare lives like these.
Oh, very important. When you see them on the truck, it's not a nice sight. But doing it this way, they're surviving, they're growing up, and they're not getting their heads cut off, and they've got a good life.
At a year old, Tracy's calves, now yearlings, end up at a feedlot where they're fed for 400 days. The Holstein mothers bring size, and while Wagyu's the world's most expensive beef due to its fine veins of marbled fat, Holsteins marble too.
We achieve very high marble scores with these cattle, 70% 7 or better on a regular basis.
Peter Wilkinson says success is all about scale, and many dairy farmers just don't have the land to do this themselves.
We see a boom in cattle prices. You'll get lots of little operators that start to try and do it themselves. Unless you're in a large-scale operation with this sort of thing, you just can't get the whole system working properly because you need volume. We've got the export end of this business that exports to 30 countries. So it's having that whole chain all the way through covered that makes it work.
And when you add the cost of the calf rearer and then the backgrounder and then it comes here for 400 days, is this an expensive process?
Yes, they're very expensive animals to produce.
By value-adding dairy's waste calves, Gerry Harvey's merged two industries which normally run parallel, dairy and beef. For dairy's sake, they need to cooperate.
When it comes to directing calves away from early life killing and into dairy beef production, the more commercial pathways we have for them, the stronger the range of solutions is going to be.
Tasmanian and Victorian-based beef processor Greenham moved into grass-fed dairy beef several years ago. The program's welfare manager, vet Dr. Sarah Bolton, once managed a dairy farm.
I was never in a position where I really felt comfortable with ending that animal's life in the first few days, and really wanted to be in a position to give every animal under my care a really good life.
Sarah went overseas on a Nuffield scholarship to research how other countries managed surplus dairy calves for her PhD. She learned industry cooperation helps.
Commercial partnerships between entities such as milk processors, retailers and beef processors offer a lot of opportunity for collaboration and actually extracting value when it comes to public trust and social licence preservation, and paying that back down the value chain to the people that need to be managing these calves in an economically viable way. And if we look at the UK, we've seen some successful examples of that. And if we look to Europe, we're seeing a lot of growth when it comes to dairy farms that raise calves in the presence of the cow. So farms that are implementing what we call cow-calf contact.
Greenham's based in dairying regions, so moving into dairy beef was easy.
There was a recognised need to increase the supply of premium grass-fed animals coming through our Never Ever programs because of customer demand. And so it made sense. It made sense to start working with dairy farms.
These dairy beef cattle were raised on dairy farms till 12 weeks old and then sent on agistment to Mick Carey's property near Wagga. It's a handy earner for him and other farmers in Victoria and New South Wales.
At the end of the day, we have a product that actually meets the same specifications as what a purebred beef animal does.
Are the customers domestic and overseas?
Yeah, so about 90% of Greenham's product is exported, and the majority of that goes to the US.
150 dairy farmers supply Greenham, and as with Dairy Beef Alliance, it's not a hard sell.
We see a lot of stress amongst dairy farmers when it comes to finding alternatives to early life killing for their non-replacement calves. And so having the program as an option for them tends to be really well received. We have a lot of farms that even find it easier to find employees to work on the farm because they're not sending calves to be killed within the first days of life or asking anyone on farm to actually euthanize healthy calves.
Queensland's Department of Agriculture and Fisheries believes it can help address bias against Holstein beef with evidence. In collaboration with the University of Queensland's Steve Duncan, Mark Bauer found Holstein and Holstein cross beef animals easily made weight and quality targets.
Were you surprised?
I probably was, because you think about the level of discrimination. You always hear this and that about dairy-derived animals. The consistency and the level of the improvement over the standard probably was surprising. The worst scoring animal was still superior to the average of the state. So that was really interesting.
That must be good news for the industry.
It's fantastic news. It means people have got a product they can actually do something with.
Results improved after advice from the US to change the high-protein dairy ration to a low-protein one.
Over time, you should expect to do better than break even, but there'll be periods when you make quite good money and periods where you probably don't make as much, or you might take a small loss. So,
just like the beef industry?
Exactly like the beef industry.
Are there carbon implications?
Yeah, Pip, that's the real sleeper in this whole discussion, is the actual carbon footprint benefits these calves have compared to a traditionally sourced animal from the beef chain.
International carbon accounting methodology actually stipulates that the majority of the dairy cow's emissions are attributed to the milk that she produces every year, and only the minority goes to the dairy beef calf.
It's about 15%. So it's a really significant benefit if you start going down that carbon accounting pathway.
Enough big operators have shown there's a valuable market for beef with 50% dairy genetics, and as the Queensland work shows, even 100% dairy cattle can produce quality beef. As a new segment of the beef industry, it's predicted dairy cows could lift the beef herd by more than 1 million head a year. Export markets and carbon wins aren't an overnight fix to the bobby problem, but they're a very big start